Welcome to this episode of the Supercharged podcast. That's a really exciting one for me because we're going to be talking about decoding the human body field, and we're very fortunate to be joined by one of our previous guests, which is Cyril Bourke. Now, instead of talking about the My Health, we're actually going to be talking about sort of both the history, the present, and the future of decoding human body field, and what it really means for humanity. Now, Cyril, what you may not know is he was also one of the early pioneers at IBM. He's also a very prominent engineer, and he's been involved in the bioenergetic medicine space from both a technical and a therapeutic aspect for, I think, about 20 years at this point. So, welcome, Cyril.
Thanks, Harry. Look, it's been an exciting journey as an engineer for me, and it was science that made me sort of think I need to know more about these things. And I applying what was, should we say, healthcare issues to science was what excites me today. And you can see that's how Harry and I got together about making things better and creating My Health technology and things of this nature. And now,
we're on the next stage. We're on the next stage,
yeah.
And it's sort of really interesting for us because we actually wrote a book, I don't know, 10, 11 years ago called Decoding the Human Body Field, and then I don't know, this year we were just like, well, sure, we decoded an aspect of the human body field, probably the most important aspect in looking at what was basically the QED part of the field. We didn't map out voice. We haven't mapped out full information from ECG. We haven't mapped out the biophoton end. And we just thought, well, now is time to do that and to really continue to further map out the full human body field. And I guess people should know why that matters. I mean, what's your view on why that matters, Cyril?
Well, it's the direction. When you're looking at how a human interacts with the rest of the world, we realise now we're picking up information from every area. And when people are looking at the communication systems and concerns about magnetics and things of this nature, if we're going to safeguard our species, we need to understand what is affecting us, how it works, how we interact, where the signals are, and how maybe some of those can be linked up in a way that we have never been able to look at before. The use of computers 20 years ago is completely different to what they are now. What we can analyse and review at super high speed is just incredible. And the artificial intelligence systems that are becoming available, we can now, with our history of healthcare, really start tying it into every aspect of human life. It's exciting, really.
It is exciting. And I think, what's sort of so curious to me is we spent 20 years mapping out the human genome. Mm-hmm. That's done. Great. However, it's not necessarily really helping people that much. I mean, this is probably going to sound awful to a lot of people in the genetic space. However, you can find out you have a particular gene expression. But when it comes down to it, 99% of the issue, or of what happens in people's health, is the epigenetic expression, which is basically down to the environment. And a gene can have a positive expression, it can have a negative expression, or it can actually have multiple expressions. But what matters more is the signal that basically triggers what it actually does. And then that's where it gets interesting, because what actually is triggering epigenetic expression, and it comes down to fields again. I mean, if we just look at what's DNA sitting in. DNA is sitting in basically structured water. So for a gene to basically express in a certain way, a field signal is basically going through that water, and it's mechanically actually pushing hydrogen or oxygen molecule against the gene to mechanically do something. And and it's just the grand I don't know how I would put it, it's the big elephant in the room that no one's saying. It's like, well, what is it that's changing epigenetic expression, and can we read that, can we look at that control system, and can we change it? And I think, another little quote, which is one of my lovely quote is from Einstein. It's not my quote; it's Einstein's, which is that the field is the sole governing force of the particle, and you can basically apply that to life, and you can say, well, the body field is the sole governing force of life. In other words, the body field itself, it is this control system. It can both be read, and it can also be altered. And it's just an extraordinarily important thing to do. I just think it's gonna take health outcomes way beyond what we can do with the limitations of genetics and biochemistry if we fully study the full human body field.
Absolutely. We're currently looking at a tiny section of the body field with our work, and other explorers, so to speak, in the science are looking at different components. And I think as those items come together with the technologies available, it's limitless in what might be possible. So, our view of it all.
Should we maybe talk to people a bit about some of the history of that? Because obviously between us,
absolutely,
we know an awful lot of the history of the bioenergetic space. Well, where should we go? Should we go back to the Vol era or something like that?
Well, look. Even if you go back further, look. I mean, Chinese medicine, sort of 4,000 or 5,000 years, they monitored the changes in the body by literally looking at the influences of energy. And they mapped what they could see, so to speak, from response. We've now, with modern testing and whole groups of people have looked at it.
Pulse diagnosis.
Pulse diagnosis.
The Chinese, for instance, they're able to do pulse diagnosis, which looks at they identified 27 different patterns, and they have names like slippery pulse, weak pulse,
characteristics, families of energy that they see in a physical response, and they tie those into characteristics in the body's expression.
And then what's pretty interesting is logically, if it's picked up in the pulse, that same information must be able to be picked up. That pulse is also reflected in ECGs and the electrical readings that we can pick up from your heart, and that's that's an area that actually we're putting in our next sensor. So we're basically able to pick up the full ECG pattern, and then we're going to be correlating against some of the pulse analysis that the Chinese did, and also sort of our own type of thinking. So that's
there's huge areas of that an ECG is only really looking at it's filtering it to the point where they only use very large and deliberate areas. But there's a massive amount of information that's hidden within the ECG that is just filtered out. And what we're going to look at is tying that detailed information, the stuff that's being ignored, and bring that to light and see how that has characteristics with other elements of the body. So
you mentioned that word light. So let's go there. So the field of Carillion photography has been around, and basically basically with Carillion photography you can see you can basically see photons coming out of, if you put your hand on something or a leaf or a food.
You can see live food, and you can see what damage is done to food in certain treatments of things like microwave ovens and stuff.
And that sort of technique has been taken further these days with a version that's called gas discharge visualization. And in order to boost the photons that you can visualize, you put in a small pulsed current. For instance, so you could put it into your hand. So you put a small pulsed current into your hand, and so it'll basically amplify up by thousands of times the photons that come out, which means you don't need some lovely photon multiplier camera to see it, which are very expensive and difficult, etc., etc. It can be picked up by more conventional camera technology, and that's really it's a really interesting thing, because this sort of concept, that people might be used to in reflexology, or we could call it holographic, but basically the whole of the body is reflected in pretty much every other part of the body. It's why the Chinese can do pulse diagnosis, tongue diagnosis. You can reflexologists can diagnose the feet. You can diagnose
a holographic response,
the hand. You can diagnose the voice. With NES, we're doing it with a QED, but the information in the body is reflected in many aspects. But when it comes to gas discharge velocity, different regions of the fingers are also where the amount of photons that come out of different parts of the fingers, that can also be correlated to different organ systems, and that's another thing that we're basically going to be doing in our next scanner, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, looking at the holographic representations, getting the body to talk through every area, or should I say, it's already doing that. What we're doing is extracting the information.
Yeah, and from multiple sources. Because if you look at the body field, broadly speaking, it's operating from sound, like very low hertz, from one hertz or so, up into light. It actually goes a little bit beyond light, but I think for most people's imagination, let's keep it to that. We'll keep it to that spectrum. And there's all of these different methodologies where we can pick up information. As I say, sound, we can pick up from voice, from ECG. You can pick up the more sort of lower hertz, the normal electromagnetic spectrum, and then obviously into the light frequencies. But when you start collecting all of that data, and this is what we haven't been able to do before in prior years, because one, we didn't really have the cloud aspect of the cloud technology, and two, AI and machine learning wasn't really accessible enough for the likes of a company our size. But now it is. So basically we're on this mission to fully decode the fuller aspects of the human body field, and the result of that is we'll be able to way more accurately be able to get to the root cause of what's going on in people's health conditions. Not that NES is particularly specialised on that, but it will actually be able to do disease diagnosis if we go in that particular direction. And then more importantly, it's also going to help to provide the route to what aspects of the body field that you want to correct, and you can absolutely instantly see the effects of different therapies to what's happening. So we will basically know, if you do something, you can then measure the response. A few seconds later, you can see how it changes the body field or not, because the body field will change much more rapidly, pretty much instantaneously, than underlying physiology, which obviously can take time.
You have to grow biology, so you have to grow the change. But we can monitor. We can monitor everything, and to summarise it all, basically, we have so many technologies now that are looking at areas that really hadn't been focused on before, and on mass measurement, mass gathering of data with partners throughout the whole industry. We'll be able to use AI to literally home in to see the body field affecting everything from every spectrum, and that's just such an exciting thing.
It's very exciting. So, if you're listening and you're an expert in AI or data science or electronics or any of these things, and you want to help with this mission, we would be very, very pleased to hear from you, of course. So, anyway, I think it's probably all we should say on the subject today.
It's going to be a global collaboration. It's going to happen. It's already started. We've already got talks with experts in certain areas, and it's great, isn't it? It's a very exciting,
pretty cool,
very exciting evolution of the discovery of the body field.
All right. Well, thank